So in Bereshit, Parak Chaf Bet, Pasuk Bet, this is in Parashat Vayera talking about the akeidat. So it says, Vayomer kach na et ki bincha et yachadecha asher ahavta et yiztchak v'lech lecha el eretz hamoria v'ha'alehu sham lo ale al achar haharim asher omar elecha. So what this means is, and he said, take now thy son, thine only son, whom thou lovest, even Isaac, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell of thee. Okay, so then Radak comes in to comment on this. It comments on the words Vayomer et Yichadcha. So even though he is your only one and you love him very much, as he has been born to you by your beloved wife, when both of you were already well into your old age, and although my request is a very difficult one, I'm asking you to do this. So as we see that Radak, he's talking about how this is a test for Avram and it's very hard, but it's still a test. So why exactly is Avram giving it to him if it's going to be such a hard and difficult test, and why is this ultimately the big test? Okay, so then the first words I'm going to bring in is Rashi, and he comments on the words kachna. Ein na ela lashon bakasha. Amar lo bavakasha mamacha amod li baza hanisayon. Shala yomru harishonot lo haya bahen mamash. So what this means is, na is an expression of a request. He, Hashem, said to him, Abraham, I plead with you, withstand this test so that no one can say that the first tests were not real. So here we see what Rashi is trying to say is that the reason Abraham had such a hard test was because it was so hard. It was a hard test. It was because he loved so much, and it was for future generations, so they wouldn't be able to say, oh, you're not giving Avram a hard test. No, of course Avram had a hard test. This was the hardest test for future generations, so they wouldn't look back and say that Abraham didn't have any real tests. Okay, so the second source I'm going to bring in is a Radak, which comments on the words Asher Amar Elacha. So what this says is, just as the time when Abram had been told to leave Haran and move to the land of Canaan in Parak Yodbet, Pasuk Aleph, he had been told only to move to a country which God would specify later on. At that time, Abraham had correctly assumed that he was to set out in the direction of the land of Canaan. The absence of this detail in both instances was to show us, the readers, that instead of questioning God on details, Abram set out to undertake difficult tasks without looking for any excuse to delay carrying out God's instructions. It would have been so easy to ask Hashem why, if he was to offer Yitzchak as a sacrifice, he first had to travel a long distance to the site where this was to take place. Actually, if we do not err, God had two good reasons why he told Abraham to do what in such an ambivalent fashion. First, to give Abraham additional credit for complying with a command which was wrapped in a riddle without questioning Hashem about it. If Hashem asked him to do this at once near his home, Abram would not have time to recover from the initial shock after hearing God's instructions. If after having had time to digest the implications of what had been asked of him, Abram proceeded without hesitating, this is even more to their credit. The second reason why God worded these instructions in the manner in which the Torah records them is to teach us that the site where the binding eventually took place is such a holy site. Moreover, after Avram named the site, we know that it is once where the attribute of justice may be changed to the attribute of mercy due to it in the manner which man relates to God's commands. Not only that, but man learned that the intention behind an action is worth more to God than the action itself, so that the binding of Yitzchak rated in Hashem's eyes as if his father had actually sacrificed him. So part of the reason why this was a big test was because Hashem wanted to see that Avraham could still follow through with his actions even after having time to think with it. Because if Hashem just told Avram to do it right away, he would be in such shock. If he was told him to do it near his house, wouldn't have time to think. He'd be in such shock. But he told him to go to Har HaMoriah, which is so far away from his house. He had to travel a long way. And it gave him time to think and recover from the initial shock. and he still even went through the action. And as the Radak explained, that it's still as if he did the action without actually doing it. And he was just able to listen to Hashem and follow and know Hashem, which is why it's so amazing that even after thinking, he didn't question Hashem, he just did it. So the last source, I actually don't have an exact source from it, like sheet for it, but it's the Barbanel, and he's commenting on this, and he says, in the binding of Yitzchak, so the akeidat Yitzchak, lies the entire glory of Israel, and their merit before their fathers in heaven is that and that is why it pervades our prayers every day. And so then Barbanel continues to explain this, and he says, because this was a time with Spanish Jewry, he says, I saw many Jews, men, women, and every young children tortured and burned at the stake in his holy name. And I bear witness that at the time they did not scream or utter any expression of pain, but they left this world in serenity and peace. So this is the strength that Abraham and Yitzchak within us, for they open the channel by which the power comes down to us this day. The power not only to die, but to live as Jews. The power to remain Jews despite every adversity God could throw at us. For this is the greatest miracle, that in the day and age there remain any Jews at all, that we still have each other, our Torah, and our heritage. So the reason for this ultimate test is the fact that Hashem's testing us to see, Hashem was testing Avram to see if he could really do this and give the ultimate strength that now as us people we have in us nowadays. And that's why it was such a huge strength, because it was a huge test, because Hashem wanted Avram to be able to create something that the rest of his nation could carry on with him. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed this lesson.